But what I want to do is just to tell you why I wrote the book very briefly, and then to maybe read a page and a half that might be the crucial paragraphs that explain the intricacies of this issue. First of all, the title. Some people have said the title is provocative, and I accept that categorization, but I don't consider the word provocative to be a negative description, because it's designed to provoke discussion and analysis and debate in a country where debate and discussion is almost completely absent, if it involves any criticism at all of the policies of Israel. And I think the book is very balanced. Secondly, the words of Palestine, peace, not apartheid, were carefully chosen by me. First of all, it's Palestine, the area of Palestinians. It doesn't refer to Israel. I've never and would have implied that Israel is guilty of any form of apartheid in their own country, because the Arabs who live inside Israel have the same voting rights and the same citizenship rights as do the Jews who live there. And the next word is peace. And my hope is that the publication of this book will not only precipitate debate, as I've already mentioned, but also will rejuvenate an absolutely dormant or absent peace process. For the last 6 years, there's not been one single day of good faith negotiations between Israelis and their neighbors, the Palestinians. And this is absolutely a departure from what has happened under all previous presidents since Israel became a nation. We've all negotiated, or attempted to negotiate, peace agreements. That has been totally absent now for 6 years. So peace. And in the last two words, not apartheid. The alternative to peace is apartheid. Not inside Israel, to repeat myself, but in the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem, the Palestinian territory. And there, apartheid exists in its more despicable forms. The Palestinians are deprived of basic human rights. Their land has been occupied and then confiscated and then colonized by the Israeli settlers. And they have now more than 205 settlements in the West Bank itself. And what has happened is, over a period of years, the Israelis have connected settlements with highways. And those highways make the West Bank look like honeycomb and maybe a spider web. You can envision it. And in many cases, most cases, the Palestinians are prevented from using the highways at all. And in many cases, even from crossing the highways. I'd like to make one other point. When Israel was founded back in 1948 by the United Nations, Israel was allocated 56% of what we would call the Holy Land between Jordan and the Mediterranean Sea. After the wars, when the Arabs tried to destroy Israel, treaties were worked out, and Israel wound up with 77% of the Holy Land. 22% was designated as the West Bank, and 1% only Gaza. So at the optimum case, as recognized by all the United Nations resolutions, Israel would wind up with 77% of the area, and the Palestinians only 23%, including Gaza and the West Bank. And remember that Gaza is on the seacoast, where the Philistines lived during the time of King David. And it's separated by 40 kilometers, about 30-mile land. So that's just a geographical description. This book is designed to re-stimulate the prospect for peace. And I'm going to just read 3 options that Israelis face. And I like to say at the beginning that none of them are completely acceptable to all Israelis. But for the last 40 years, a strong majority of Israelis have preferred to relinquish Arab land in return for peace. And this sentiment prevailed until the time when Prime Minister Rabin was assassinated by an irate Israeli who didn't like what Rabin and Shimon Peres had done at Oslo in negotiating a peace agreement for which they both received the Nobel Peace Prize. So this is what I have to say. Although a clear majority of Israelis are persistently willing, I'm on page 214 if you want to cover along. Although a clear majority of Israelis are persistently willing to accept terms that are tolerable to most of our Arab neighbors, it is clear that none of the options is attractive for all Israelis. And these are the three options. First one has been discussed quite extensively and most persistently by the present Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Olmert, who presented this thesis quite early in his career as a young member of the Israeli parliament. He's now the Prime Minister. A forceful annexation of Palestine and its legal absorption into Israel, which would give large numbers of non-Jewish citizens the right to vote and live as equals under the law. So a large sectarian nation involving both Israelis and Palestinians is this option. This would directly violate international standards and the Camp David Accords, which are the basis for peace with Egypt. At the same time, non-Jewish citizens would immediately make up a powerful swing vote if other Israelis were divided. In other words, if Israelis who now have a majority were divided 60-40 or 50-50, as you can see, then if the Palestinians voted as a bloc, they would prevail in establishing the basic policies of Israel. If other Israelis were divided, it would ultimately constitute an outright majority in the new greater Israel. This is because of demographic trends. The Palestinians have a much higher birth rate than do the Israelis, the Israeli Jews. In fact, in Gaza, which I described, the Palestinian birth rate is 4.7% annually, which is the highest in the world. And that means that in Gaza at this time, half their citizens are 15 years old or less. Israel would be further isolated and condemned by the international community. So I think within 20 years or less, in a combined Israel and Palestinian land, the Arabs would actually have a majority, more than the Jews. Second, a system of apartheid. This is, remember, in Palestine, with two peoples occupying the same land, but completely separated from each other, with Israelis totally dominant and suppressing violence by depriving Palestinians of their basic human rights. This is a policy now being followed. Although many citizens of Israel deride the racist connotation, which I certainly don't imply, of prescribing permanent second-class status for the Palestinians. As one prominent Israeli stated, quote, "I am afraid that we are moving toward a government like that of South Africa, with a dual society of Jewish rulers and Arab subjects, with few rights of citizenship. The West Bank," this Israeli said, "is not worth it." And that's a majority, that's the opinion of a majority of Israelis. An unacceptable modification of this choice now being proposed is the taking of substantial portions of the occupied territory, with the remaining Palestinians completely surrounded by walls, fences, and Israeli checkpoints, living as prisoners within the small portion of land left to them. I think you can quickly see the unacceptability of both of those options. There's only one option left, and that is withdrawal to the 1967 border as specified in UN Resolution 242 and as promised legally by the Israeli government in the Camp David Accords and the Oslo Agreement, and prescribed in the roadmap of the International Quartet. You remember the quartet consists of the United States and Russia and the United Nations and the European Union. Those four comprise a quartet, and they have devised the latest proposal known as the Roadmap for Peace, which has been enthusiastically endorsed by President Bush, as you know.